I'm of the eternally optimistic belief that life allows us evolution of consciousness. And believe me, when cancer diagnosis arrives, I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't have an acceleration in that area of their contemplation. And many people, I honestly feel 100%. I can't think of a single patient I've dealt with who hasn't expressed to me in one way or another that her cancer was a blessing.
Welcome to CancerTalks, a podcast sharing personal stories of transformation from people whose lives have been touched by cancer. My name is Cheryl Buck, and I will be guiding today's conversation. Our guest today is Ricki Pollycove, a doctor who founded San Francisco Integrative Gynecology with a commitment to listening carefully to women's health concerns, mood issues, and past experiences with healthcare. She is a mother and now a grandmother of 2 little girls. Hi, Ricki.
Good morning.
So wonderful to see you here. I'm very excited to get to have this conversation with you.
Me too.
So what I would really like is to hear about your life, and starting when you were younger, where you were born and raised, and any defining moments in your life, things that really you could start to see the Ricki that you are today start to show up.
Yeah, it's sort of fun to look back at my own biography. And I do think that it helps people identify or resonate with others that they haven't met yet and embrace what they have to say when they have a feeling of your background, your humanity. So I feel like mine, as I grew up, I thought I was just sort of typical normal. And I think most of us are like that. So I was actually born in Boston. Then my father finished his training. I had 3 older siblings who were all born in San Francisco. So we returned to the Bay Area. And I grew up in Walnut Creek from age 4. That, I think, in retrospect, was very important because I actually grew up embedded in nature. In the olden days, in the 50s, where we lived was at the very edge of a very new integrated housing development, the Eichler Tract. So that was a big deal in the 50s. Of course, you're not aware of that when you're a kid. But what was wonderful is we had natural creeks and streams, and I was enchanted with the evolution of the pollywog into a frog. I mean, these are little things, but actually my interest in college kind of stemmed from that. In fact, turning over rocks and noticing all the different critters that lived where it was a little more humid. So my mother was a Rachel Carson advocate, and most people I've learned today don't even know who she was. But for those for whom her name is unfamiliar, she was really the first deep ecologist. She studied the Erie Canal. She studied Lake Michigan. She was a biologist and a tremendous ecological observer. So in those days, we called it conservation. But my mom had every book that Rachel Carson wrote, and her most famous one, which you should look up, is Silent Spring.
Yes.
So my awareness of pesticides, and of course, I lived in an agricultural town. We used to see the overhead pesticide airplane sprayers, the crop dusters, so to speak. Anyway.
Right.
So I actually grew up with this, in retrospect, sense of harnessing nature, for the walnut growers. That's why it was called Walnut Creek, where I grew up. And very aware of the seasons and fruits ripening and all that kind of simple stuff. But I didn't realize what my background meant until friends of my parents who lived in San Francisco out by the beach took their young boys. When I was in college, they took them on a field trip to see where oranges grew that didn't just come out of a can in the frozen food section. So I began to appreciate, I guess I had a pretty down-to-earth background after all. But meanwhile, my father was a nuclear physicist. And
can I just go back? What did your mom think about the planes that were crop dusting and, spreading pesticides, given her relationship with Rachel Carson?
Well, when she learned that we would run outside to watch because it was so exciting, she was
Yes.
horrified. So I don't
Yes.
know if I was sprayed with DDT or whatever. But, she was interesting politically. Obviously, she was pretty liberal, but she was busy being a music teacher and a mother of 4 children with no help.
Well,
So she did not do anything political about that, but she
mhm.
certainly educated us
Yes.
about the fact that there would be a price to pay. Of course, we didn't know about DDT and birds' eggs yet, but
Mhm.
then we had Jerry Brown when he was governor of California for the first time with what we call the medfly. I mean, there's a lot of history that you tuck into your childhood and your young adulthood that you don't realize, oh, that was a sentinel event. But
Yes.
all of these things, brought into play the concept that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, which is a principle from physics. But when you apply that to your own life, you think, oh, wow, perhaps my inattention to self has contributed to the imbalance in my body or the imbalance in my mood. So I think
Mhm.
there are many subtle ways in which observing nature and then seeing what didn't happen. For example, we have now the problem with the pollinators, the bees, who have
Mhm.
been killed by our agricultural practices and pesticides. So way back then, I think for my generation, I had an unusual awareness of potentially harmful outcomes from things that, in general were accepted as good and necessary.
Yes. But your mom knew that they weren't.
Yes, and I
So
think
she
she
was ahead of her
she
time.
was definitely highly sensitive on an intuitive level. I mean, she was a
Mhm.
fantastic concert pianist. I remember asking her where,
Mhm.
Beethoven and Mozart got all those notes and how they scribbled them down with a feather pen. And she pointed up to the sky and looked up to the heavens. And she
Wow.
said they channeled it.
Wow.
And, you can't just channel it without some background in music, but that's
Yes.
so that I've had a lot of wonder, despite the balancing other side of the physics and the linearity of, rational, logical, deductive thought.
Yes.
So I think as a child, again, you don't see that you're fortunate to have the yin and the yang
Mhm.
in sort of drinking it in. And my mother brought a very deep spiritual inquiry actually to my father, who fortunately for all of us embraced that. So they studied anthroposophy, which is the study of man and meaning
Mhm.
as articulated particularly by Rudolf Steiner. I think that also gave me a taproot of looking for other energies, other forces that Western science, which is very reductionist,
Mhm.
overlooked. So my mom definitely had a direct conduit to the sentient and I think perhaps clairvoyant universe.
That is fascinating. I know that you are a student of anthroposophy. Is
Yes,
that how you say it?
yes,
Anthroposophy? But I did not know that it started with your parents.
yes. And in fact, my dedication to the California Institute of Integral Studies
Mhm.
really grew out of that because I was told by my parents to try to attend this lecture by Robert McDermott in the fall of 1990 when he came from the East Coast as the new president of CIIS.
Uh-huh.
And my parents knew him through the Anthroposophical Society of North America, which
Wow.
met in High Point, New York. So, I'd heard a little bit of the household names and okay, I was curious. And the synthesis of his view of just life, but philosophy and sort of spirituality. Of course, I'd been in practice 10 years then. So I was, 10 years post my residency, 14
Mhm.
years since graduating from UCSF Medical School. Let's see, add 5 to that. So 19 years after graduating from UC Berkeley. So, I'm pretty well steeped in 20 years immersion at least in Western everything.
Yes.
And so I took on an active search to balance my own life with studying maybe the esoteric, but more the philosophical and the spiritual aspects of humanity.
Uh-huh. And so you studied this on your own, not in school or
Right. I tell my patients I have had this parallel track, like a river flowing alongside my very intense curiosity and rigor in medicine. I'm a big journal reader. I'm disappointed to tell you that most doctors don't read journals really at all. And unless you've made a steady diet of that, and I have a pretty broad view of what's worth reading, like the New England Journal, Journal of the American Medical Association, the oncology journals, especially as it relates to breast cancer, and oncology as it relates to uterine cancer. I know a ton about cervical, so I have awe of the Western amazing world of knowledge we have about growth, on the cellular level, on the micromolecular level. I mean, I'm in awe of these elegant biologic processes, and I get excited looking at the newer electron microscopy that's kind of live, where when I was in college, they had these giant machines in the basement of the life sciences building at Cal that really were almost as big as a house. And one of those was an electron microscope, and we only saw things in black and white. Anyway, but still, it was pretty thrilling. Wow. So these aspects I realize now, it's almost like a mystical appreciation of the elegance of regulation of growth on a micromolecular, cellular, nuclear level, how those chromosomes dance and how they might be inhibited, how they are copied perfectly. I mean, that's pretty magical, really, when you get right down to it. On the other hand, mostly until very recently, Western medicine hasn't looked at the influence of your feeling self, your soul self, your emotional, spiritual self on those microbiologic processes. And I think that's where naturally, fortunately, inside of me, I've had receptors intellectually to receive, think about, wonder about both worlds kind of simultaneously, I can say now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is unusual.
Fascinating. Yeah.
It's kind of like people choose one camp or the other. And when I first kind of labeled myself in the mid-'80s as an integrative practitioner, a lot of my colleagues would say, "Oh, are you an alternative medicine doctor?" I'd say, no, I'm an everything that works in medicine doctor.
There you go.
And even today, we have, my way or the highway. We have a lot of people who, in fact, I find a lot of the, quote, alternative practitioners, or what I would like to say complementary, because we should all ideally come together to bring you, the individual consumer, the balance of healthcare modalities that resonate with you. Everybody has his or her fave. So anyway, now I think we're seeing happily a greater trend because Western medicine has lost its, I think, luster. Clearly, we have blown it. If everything we know should result in better health, well, look at our national health data. It's quite concerning. And of course, if we talk about minority health and disparities there, since George Floyd, I can tell you the journals, every issue now has articles about healthcare disparity. Now,
interesting.
That's
wow.
at least step.
It is step one.
Step one. The next step, which is much harder, is what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And of course, I'm slightly of the belief now that it's the babies being born now who are going to receive a different education, like my 4 and 6-year-old granddaughters. They're very aware of these kinds of issues. The 6-year-old told my daughter, Mom and Dad, you need to have an electronic car, like they have. They have a little car that has a battery. They plug it in, and anyway, but the 6-year-old knows that.
Yes, right.
So things are looking up.
So
but
things are looking up.
We've got the healthcare of today, which is a mess. And so, if you want balance in yourself, in your life, in your body, you have to work pretty hard to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do you achieve that? Let's talk about that. What can people do?
I think pay attention to how you really feel. Like one of the concerns I have, I see a lot of women going through the menopausal transition. Now, I know the science of hormones back and forth and up and down and for many, many years. And if women say to their doctor, I don't feel good, I feel creaky. I can't sleep. My joints are stiff. I'm depressed. I don't lubricate with sex anymore. My body just absolutely feels terrible. What does the doctor say? The vast majority of doctors right now just pat her on the wrist or say, well, you can take this medicine for your mood. You can take another medicine, put in some local cream if you feel dry vaginally. You need to exercise more, take an Epsom salt bath, go see a physical therapist. I mean, but what's the fundamental experience of the woman? Huh? What's missing is her estrogen. So I've practiced through a very anti-estrogen 20 years. And you add to that the mistrust of the public. So, like, where do people turn? They've been taught to not trust how they feel by many of the providers who have the MD after their name. And so we see, and I've tried to influence a lot of MD type doctors in my continuing education talks to say, what's so different when a woman or man or non-binary sees an acupuncturist or a naturopath or a chiropractor? They spend usually at least 30 minutes with the person. And that makes a difference. 8 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, rushing in, rushing out, electronic medical records, typing in front of the patient. That does not resonate trust or good listening.
Yes.
So we need to first listen to ourselves, trust our own values, and then maybe we should suspend some of our own prejudices. Like I often have to talk women into traditional Chinese medicine, like the concept of bladder qi, bladder energy. You know, this is a fantastic circulation sex view of traditional Chinese medicine, about which, of course, most doctors don't know, but most of our public doesn't know.
Right.
So when I bridge this gap, it's kind of a joy because then I know for her, she's very likely to have good control of her urine again. Maybe her orgasms will be better. Her love life will be better. And it connects her to her own energy balance, which isn't it fascinating that Western medicine does not individualize like that?
Yes, exactly. I think of my mom who went to the doctor on a regular basis in the last 10, 15 years of her life. And I went with her for probably the last 10. And every time we sat in that doctor's office, she said, I just don't feel right. I don't know what it is. And there was no conversation. There was no trying to get at what could it possibly be that's going on with this person who clearly doesn't feel right, whatever that is. We never did find out what it was.
Well, we as individual humans need to maintain our curiosity, but especially, I think, physicians, care providers, we need to be curious. And I mean, I can look back from childhood. I've been insatiably curious. So that turns out in school, maybe not such a good thing because you can get distracted. On the other hand, in life, it's a very good thing. And I do think for where we are at the moment, we need to be curious. Like take our political scene. I'm curious how much, in fact, that negatively impacts individual health. I say to at least one person every day, we are embedded in an era, a time of great sadness and loss of trust, loss of connection, loss of meaning. We have physical distancing because of the COVID concerns, infectious diseases. So, I mean, the grief that's hanging in the culture, I mean, we are all drinking that in. And many of the women I see are totally relieved to hear me say that, like, because they respect me. And I don't say, that's why you're having headaches, but I'm curious, how much are you embracing the reality of what a bummer this era is? And what are we doing to counteract that negative influence that's sort of, to me, like the undertow that is continuously dragging you down? We need to do something positive.
And do you have recommendations for that? Because that is everywhere.
It sounds corny, but I think to make a purposeful call to at least one friend every day And if they don't answer, just leave a voicemail. Don't make an appointment. Don't have it a Zoom meeting. Just like spontaneous, old-fashioned.
What?
You
Spontaneous?
just call people and ask him, her, they, how are you feeling? How are you really feeling? Because then you have an invitation to listen and resonate together.
Yes.
So that's a togetherness thing. And the other sounds corny, simple, but believe me, it took me 30 years of practice to think, oh, but the breath. One of the cool things is speech is breath made audible when you think about it. We form the breath as we exhale. Well, you think about all the ancient practices, they all include breathing, chanting, something with purposeful movement of air through the chest. Again, what has happened, especially since COVID, people sit at usually computers, their chest, just their ribs, everything is not in motion. So there's no dynamism to your day. Anyway, I feel intuitively that ain't right. But these are the things. Okay, I tell so many women, take a minute, breathe. I have a little practice that was taught to me in the mid-'80s by an acupuncturist. It's so simple. You just make a little tripod with your fingers, your thumbs down and a little notch in your chin, your index fingers at the little notch at the side of your temples, and then your middle finger at the little notch in the bridge of your nose. And you close your eyes and you make sure that your elbows are resting on something like a desk. And all you're going to do, you're going to close your mouth and you're going to just pay attention as you inhale to the coolness of the air, and as you exhale, the warmth of the air. And you do that for 10 breaths. That takes about a minute.
Yes.
I teach this in my office. Women are in a hurry to finish up and hurry up the 10 breaths. It's like, no, we have time. So these are simple practices of breath for beginners, but just taking literally a minute.
Yes.
Reboots. Now we have all kinds of science that show the good effect in your lymphocytes, the good effect in all these inflammatory markers that we can measure. Isn't that fascinating? So now
it is fascinating.
One of the cool things, we have the science that validates what these old gurus and wisdom people have been offering for centuries.
Yes. And some of us are listening.
Yes. And I think, my only anxiety, if I can call it that, is we need to accelerate the rate at which people join the listening community.
Yes.
And deep listening, a la Thomas Berry, Joanna Macy, really listening to Mother Earth, listening to yourself.
Yes.
It's so important to do that and respond to it. Because if you don't like what you're hearing, okay, we need to engage to alter the flow of the stream. And I do think I got that big time from my childhood. My parents said things like, it's a lot easier to motivate people with their base instincts. And they used to sort of point to the lower part of the body, like the poopy parts, the shitty parts. So I do think more than we might appreciate as we are coming along that little track of childhood to young adulthood, it all matters. And obviously, this is what we've learned about trauma. It doesn't go away. You have to heal it.
Yes.
So, in terms of the cancer conversation, I don't like to ever say that your cancer is because ...
Right.
But I can certainly embrace many of the things in all of our lives that might contribute to imbalance about which we can do something moving forward and heal those things actively, as opposed to just put it to the side because it's unpleasant to think about that. We've learned the fallacy of time heals all wounds. Honestly, time heals nothing. And it gives you wrinkles.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad this is a podcast, not a webinar. Cancer Talks is an interdependent community project with a production team of 3, and we count on your contributions. We'd like to thank Barbara Strebel for her generous contribution. If you've learned from or been inspired by these conversations, please consider joining Barbara and becoming a donor. To support us, starting at $5 a month, or to make a larger tax-deductible contribution, visit patreon.com/CancerTalks. Well, let's go back to when you started out in medicine. You started as in OBGYN, obstetrics and gynecology, right? And you delivered a lot of babies.
Yes.
And at some point, after 4 decades maybe of birthing babies, you decided to focus on women with cancer. Can you talk about that? Tell us what that conversation was for you.
Well, a strength, a power to just say no to obstetrics, which I loved, was my own daughter. I just knew that I was physically just too tired. Amazingly, most of the work I did was at night, so it didn't impact, I was home when she woke up in the morning, and I never missed a birthday party, things like that. But I had to be honest, I was just tired all the time. And I got very sick. When she was about 2.5, that didn't slow me down, although it nearly killed me. But the residuals of that viral encephalitis when I was 35, from which I woke up cortically blind, which for those of you who don't know what that means, it means that you really can't see. You can see light, but you can't organize it because that's done in the back part of your brain. It did heal, fortunately, which, if it didn't, I certainly would not have had a career in medicine after that. But my sight came back gradually. But what I saw, I should share this, when I could not see with my eyes in a normal way, I saw auras, the colors and the shapes around people. And I recognized sort of their voice. I mean, I was very ill. I was in a coma for 4 or 5 days. So when I woke up, I was, let us say, in an altered state. So that paved the way for living much more actively with an appreciation of the near-death experience.
Yes.
Being blessed to not only recover, but not have a seizure disorder. That would have certainly cut my medical and obstetrical career short. So, and also I didn't have a tremor. I'm so fortunate.
Yeah. How long were you without sight?
About a week that I recall, but I couldn't read. I couldn't, I could say A, B, C, but I couldn't put letters together to make a word. So there were many associative integrative functions. And of course, I knew enough neurology to know, whoa, man, my brain is really a mess. So, without having a stroke, but having a brain injury that, man, I don't think as an adult you can get sicker than that and come back and be totally functional. But it helped me take my own wellness or illness more seriously. So I realized I had to model what I believed in. So it still took me several years again. But in quitting obstetrics, I had much more room in my time with patients to focus on what I knew the most about, which was actually breast cancer. My background had been breast cancer research at the Cancer Research Genetics Lab at UC Berkeley. So, and I'd been tasked, interestingly, just before I got sick, I was asked to establish a women's comprehensive breast health center at my hospital. So it integrated me, actually, to quit obstetrics, and having a baby myself, man, did that ever make me a better obstetrician? Yeah. But no, it was like, you can't have everything, honey. Like Gloria Steinem said, you can have it in series, but not in parallel. And, what that means for people who don't know about these things, it's just like, okay, you can do one thing very well at one time, but not everything at its absolute best all the time.
Yes.
So I prioritize motherhood and sanity and my health.
Yes.
And then I had many of my colleagues say, I can't believe you gave up OB for all this cancer. And I remember the first time I answered that, I said, you know what? I share more love with my cancer patients than I ever shared with all the happy schmappy joy of obstetrics.
Right.
So I did not leave joy behind. I
Yes,
actually
that's right. You added joy.
deepened the
You
love
deepened
shared.
the love and the joy. Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes, that's right. And why do you say that? That you have more love with your cancer patients because you spend more time with them and you really get to the crux of life, or?
Well, I actually think it's because they've been humbled.
Hmm.
It's scary.
Hmm.
In a way, you get naked with yourself when you've had, I think my encephalitis made me get naked with myself,
Yes.
but you are much more likely to open gently and honestly to a deeper inquiry about life.
Hmm.
And I'm of the eternally optimistic belief that life allows us evolution of consciousness.
Hmm.
And believe me, when cancer diagnosis arrives, I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't have an acceleration in that
Hmm.
area of their
Yes.
contemplation. And many people, many women, I honestly feel 100%. I can't think of a single patient I've dealt with who hasn't expressed to me in one way or another that her cancer was a blessing.
Yes.
And, I take care of a lot of very high powered businesswomen and attorneys and financial empire whiz bangs. And, in many respects, I know that they're out of balance way before they know that.
Hmm.
And until you're humbled by the cancer diagnosis, you're kind of just running with the cultural norm.
Yes.
Well, I'm here to say, and I've said it really my whole career, the cultural norm is not healthy. All
Yes.
one has to do is look at the fast food industry. Okay, that's glaring. But as a doctor, I have watched just in, I can't believe, but now it's 40 and a half years, but I don't just look at my patients. I look at national data statistics for diabetes, for high blood pressure, for stroke, heart attack, heart disease, just all the things that make life miserable or cut it short. And we definitely have a root disorder in the culture. So cancer kind of is like you picked up the needle from the old phonograph record and you're on pause
Hmm.
because you have to. Because
Yes.
now, unless you've decided, okay, it's time for me to go, you need to choose an intervention.
Yes.
Even if you're totally anti-Western medicine, no one's going to touch me this, surgical blade, and I'm not having chemo. But you're probably going to embrace some healing modality.
Yes.
And so I see it as an opening of inquiry of the heart. And then the next beautiful thing that happens is you see the community of loving people who want to help you
Hmm.
heal, be whole
Yes.
again. And again,
Yes.
when you come to breast, that's an area kind of like AIDS. It's really the consumers that activated the movement of holistic breast care. So the Breast Health Center is where
Hmm.
women who have had breast cancer go for their ongoing needs as a group that's specially identified with what I call my learning experience, my portal of entry into this really bigger, more beautiful universe of balance and healing and
Hmm.
love.
Hmm. That's what happens when people are part of the breast health center.
Yes, if you look at pretty much every breast center across our country, and we have these models that the National Consortium of Breast Centers has basically made free. There's an NQMBC organization, which is about quality in all these breast centers. We have exported how to do it free of charge to the world. These
Hmm.
are international linked groups now. And what's so elegant, it's not woo woo. You don't even see
Hmm.
it. It looks like just, this is the way we're organized, but the invitation within each center to go deep and be a participant in a community is incredible. We have psychologists and counselors, nurse specialists, we call them navigators to take, any of the pejorative assumption out of it. People who help you see what parts of this offering resonate with you that you'd like to engage in. Many
Yes.
women, at first, they say, no, I don't want a support group. Yeah, no, I'm too busy. I got to get back to work. I'm making time for my radiation therapy, but support group, that's a bit over the top.
Uh-huh.
So,
Oh, wow.
like, hello, maybe
Yes.
isolation is part of this disease. But anyway, most all come around.
Uh-huh.
And of course, then they develop a sisterhood of friends like they've never had,
Yes.
because they're all in it for the heart sharing,
Yes, that's right.
the depth.
They've found a community, and
Absolutely.
healing really occurs in community.
We leave pretense behind and we show up as our real self. It's a
Yes.
real liberation exercise.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's beautiful. I did not know that there was this network of breast cancer health centers.
And we have breast buddies, kind of a play on best buddies,
Yes.
but
Yes.
breast buddies, so that women volunteer who've had breast cancer.
Uh-huh.
In fact, there's a wonderful book out that I'll plug because I know the author, again, a bit of loving serendipity, but her name is Arlene Karole, Karole, and it's called Just Diagnosed.
Yes.
But I happened to sit next to her at a meeting about 6 years ago where I was speaking on basically heart health for women, and she was the organizer, and she'd just been hit over the head with this, club of being just diagnosed with breast cancer. So
yes.
The journey that she took, she's so meticulous as an organizer. She organized her notebook, and then that notebook became this book, Just Diagnosed. But these are the sorts of things that you can quietly sit there at home, read it, resonate with what you also feel. And it's in seeing the amazing similarity of the experience and kind of how we scramble with our intellectual organizer brain to fit it all into our head, and then go into that place of not knowing, that scary place.
Yes.
And then, of course, we don't get stuck there if we continue to be curious. Like, no, I'm not going to get stuck here. Yes. And then you find the people that you can trust that are going to help you create your healing path. We don't call it that. We call it recovery, the West. But, your disease-free life ahead, your survivorship. But I like...
If only that were true.
I like the word thrivership, but even that's kind of corny. And each journey is different because, I also believe in karma. I think we all come with an amazing uniqueness that, we share a lot and we're not separated. And yet the quality of each personality, each soul nature, that's what my parents called it, your soul nature. That's what,
Oh,
anyway.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So cancer is the invitation, the uninvited guest that moves you over in your life and gives you an opportunity to open in ways that you may have run right past, but they were there the whole time.
Yes. You said an invitation to heal. Cancer is an invitation to heal.
Absolutely.
And that you're not saying to just heal, just to get rid of the cancer. You're saying it in a much broader context.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, again, I use the word micromolecular because that sort of takes people who haven't spent time looking under a microscope. But we all know that when you look under a microscope, if it says 8x or 12x or 100x, that means how many magnifications you're looking down that tube at something.
Yes.
And we go much further than that with all the elegant probes we have, these DNA probes that recognize things that are like the mirror opposite of this and sort of bind to it. And then we have fluorescence. I mean, we have ways of understanding so many elegant aspects of how you're actually put together and what influences the whole of you. Or what I call the black box of me, all those internal things that, thank God, happen without me having to direct the show here. But if somehow, there were some rogue cells and they escaped detection or annihilation, and your body has a billion of these a day that go rogue, and they're all repaired except for one. So it's, you can do the math, you can look at it all different ways, but ultimately, when you get right down to it, it's kind of a miracle that we are as well as we are. And then when you step back, you start to see, gosh, did I literally ever stop to smell the roses? I mean, I walk my dog. I don't see anybody on a warm day. Gosh, there's so many roses in neighbors' yards. I don't see other people bending over to sniff. I mean, to me, these are the little things that I've always done. I didn't appreciate that, maybe that's part of, how lucky I am to be that way. But these are the little things that probably mean so much. You take a moment to inhale joy.
Yes.
And your consciousness shifts a little bit. So it may sound corny, but when faced with your mortality for real, then this is what I call the deeper inquiry into my own balance. And that's the humbling part. And of course, we can all go back to our bad habits as soon as, quote, I'm cancer free. And plenty of people have been encouraged to do that because, again, the system is still pretty mechanistic and superficial and, linear. On the other hand, you are embedded now at a time when you can follow your curiosity and find that community that's open. You're not going to embrace it right away because it's not going to be an authentic, intimate understanding yet. But especially now with podcasts or with webinars where you can show up online, as much as computers can be deadly, but they can also bring us together. And I think it's fantastic, the number of opportunities we have now to find resonant communities. Communities that, wow, I never really thought about that, but that strikes me as worth thinking about. So I want to learn more. So then you can, go down that rabbit hole. But usually it isn't a rabbit hole. It may be that you just discovered, in fact, a beautiful, elegant gold mine.
Yes.
So,
well, at this point, I'll put in a little plug for something, which is at CancerTalks, we have a community gathering every other week, so twice a month, and it's on Zoom, and we have people come and go, but we have a sort of a regular group, and it's people who've been touched by cancer. So people who either have had the cancer experience or in the middle of it or towards the end of it, or people who have helped family members or loved ones go through the cancer journey. And we talk about whatever people want to talk about. And we really are a community, and it's a beautiful thing. And anybody can come because everybody's been touched by cancer, right? If you think about it.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think what you're doing, what you're offering is so important. I have a beautiful story from this week. So I was the invited speaker, webinar attendee for a group of business women who are all pretty high level, and they self-select. And how I got invited, no surprise, was a couple of my patients belonged to this group. But the one who introduced me had an abnormal mammogram and a ductal carcinoma in situ. So that's pre-cancer, but we treated pretty much like something serious, something almost cancer. So, and, she was charming, and, I had a nice annual visit with her for many years before this happened. But I became, which is my nature, her advocate through this journey. And knowing the science, this is a very important part of her journey. I said, well, I really think you need to get a second opinion on your basic core biopsy. And so from an independent pathologist who's an expert, who I know through the Breast Cancer Consortium for, 35, 40 years. So anyway, it all adds up. It's all that magical connectivity. And when the expert looked at her tissue, he said, you've not had a complete excision, which was my concern, because the first pathology description wasn't detailed enough and didn't talk about margins. That's an important little detail. So, being her advocate through this, she wound up having 3 rounds of excisional biopsies until she had what he was pretty confident she was clear. And it's now, 5 years later, but it's been an incredible journey. And the breast surgeon who did her multiple biopsies, even though she's not very large breasted, her exam is totally normal. You cannot tell. And the incision is sort of in the natural crease anyway. It's the whole experience has been pretty elegant. But the way she introduced me to this group, and that's why I tell you the details,
Yes.
because she's in her business community, right?
Right.
And she's talking about how important it is to be your whole self and how lucky she was to have this doctor who invited her to that place. That's
beautiful. Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. And of course, anyway, these are the things that, 25, 30 years ago, people were very reluctant. They partitioned, they separated my real life from my business, my professional life. Well, that's another beautiful thing, by the way, about the pandemic. So many people have seen, like you on a webinar would see my bedroom. You'd see my Tonka over here with Saraswati, and then you'd see this wonderful, fanciful undersea painting by a Hawaiian artist. But people love the fact that, like on the news, if you watch a little bit, you're seeing people's homes now, not just the studio. So again, it's part of bringing people together. Oh, look what they have in their kitchen behind there.
Yes.
They have real flowers, not fake flowers. So to me, this is part of, it's sort of ironic that in our separateness, in many ways, we're more together than ever.
Yes, more intimate.
Exactly.
Intimately connected.
And this is part, if you've had cancer, you didn't need the pandemic to get there.
Yes.
You had another invitation. So, I'm not Pollyanna. I'd certainly rather have intimacy, connectivity with people without cancer or without the pandemic, but it's how we respond. This is the Buddhist in a nutshell. It's how we respond to these negative challenges that really makes the quality of life, not what happens to us. I mean, I always say cancer and horrible things are an equal opportunity employer.
Yes.
But how I respond to it, that's up to me. And that's where I take charge, and I'm much more dedicated to being an active advocate for myself. And, as a physician, believe me, I've been pretty lonely in the profession because I'm not fish or fowl. I'm not like anybody I'm embedded in a tertiary care medical center, and I'm not a total weirdo. I'm not a nut or a flake. I do bioidentical hormones, but I do FDA approved. I use products that have research and data and long-term outcomes behind them. I don't use mystery creams by some fanciful compounding person that I never met. That's not a validated product. I would never recommend that to patient because I can't be assured of the purity and the quantity of that. So I'm very rigorous in those ways. So that might sound rigid and, a little bit too linear for some people. On the other hand, we've already talked about traditional Chinese medicine. I think Ayurveda has a lot of wisdom. I think anthroposophical medicine, which is unique in that way back in the 19 teens and 20s, Rudolf Steiner and friends, he was a tremendous scientist. He went to medical school. He was a chemist before that. And so he did not use a reductionist view of man. And of course, the language is very antiquated, but I like to say the human being, because there are many beings. We just have to be the human form of beings. Anyway, and I think it's neat to read about anthroposophical medicine only because it is really the alpha and the omega, ideally, of integrated medicine. Like it includes movement, dance, and also breath work with singing, chanting, reciting poetry. I mean, this is all, as you go to an anthroposophical doctor, like even the way they do massage has rhythm to it. So, who's thought about rhythm? Well, if you've been a mother with a newborn or an infant or a toddler, you realize, the rhythm of their day is very important. Like my mom used to say, you give an external structure that's predictable, and then that internal chaos and creativity of the child is safe and secure. That's pretty cool.
That is very cool. Yes.
It's true for us older folk too. I have a rhythm to my day, and I put myself to bed like I put my little baby daughter to bed.
Yes.
It's an intentional, sweet night-night Ricki time. Of course, that's not I'm not singing myself the 14 Angels song from Hansel and Gretel, but but it's with a spirit of loving tranquility and, entering into another realm of consciousness while you're sleeping. I mean, that's sort of cool. But most people never think about that. And of course, what do we have rampant in the culture? Sleep disorders. I would say the vast majority of my cancer patients have had a sleep disorder for years. Many times they've medicated. Not to say bad sleep causes cancer. It's just another sign of our imbalance. I mean, I never heard about sleep disorders in native societies. For example, we study in medical anthropology Stone Age cultures today. They don't have insomnia.
Right.
That's a Western invention.
Yes.
So these are just, to me, like, wow, let's think about that. Yeah. That's an imbalance. It's a sign of imbalance. So what has the Western world done with sleep? We now have sleep evaluations. We go to the sleep expert.
That's
we get little, plastic tubing or, a CPAP machine that, looks like you're on the airplane all night with the mask over you. Hey, if it helps you and you wake up refreshed and you're getting better sleep, I'm all for it. On the other hand, like, okay, with such a natural thing that we didn't have before, meaning natural sleep, we didn't have a sleep disorder before. That's an opportunity to think, maybe there's just some elements, some energy in my surroundings that I'm drinking in, I'm allowing in. I'm not opposing these not good for me energies that I should do something about. So like yesterday, I referred a woman to a sleep evaluation. She has a very unusual sleep disorder. She'll get to sleep and then wake up an hour later, get to sleep again after struggling to get to sleep, wake up an hour and a half later. That's actually a very unusual sleep disorder. So it will be interesting to see what her sleep study shows. After she does the Western thing, she'll probably be ready for a more integrative inquiry.
Yes. In anthroposophical medicine, do they talk about sleep?
Oh, yes.
Were you saying that? Okay. So I, and probably many people who are listening, would like to know what's a good way to learn about the anthroposophical medicine. Are there books that you could recommend? And
Sure. And actually, this is where right now the internet is incredible. And you can just put that in your search engine. You do kind of have to spell it almost correctly. It, spell checks you and corrects it. Did you really mean? But anyway, and then you can hear lectures. I think this article that's in the National Library of Medicine is just so succinct and it's very much in depth. And again, to me, what it ignites is your curiosity. It makes you wonder, like rhythmicity. This is something, well, let's talk about something we all pay attention to, hopefully every day, but bowels. So in Ayurvedic medicine, for example, they talk about quick mind, slow body. Many people who live in their head tend towards constipation. Okay, so if you go to the Western doctor, they say you need to take fiber, you need to take a stool softener, you need to drink lots of water, take some magnesium at bedtime, every day, And now your bowels are regular. But have you actually also rebalanced your energy? Maybe too much in your head, not enough in your body. So I love those Western medicine things and they work. And it's an invitation maybe to some yoga poses to, enhance your energy. And I think the same is true when you look at sleep. So sleep hygiene is sort of the new catchphrase, but these are the things that rather than just give you a medication, Ambien or Lunesta or something to knock you out. Okay, let's do that. You'd have to get some sleep, but now that you got your sleep and your brain back, let's make a pretty systematic inquiry. What's your internal chaos? And of course, what a lot of women tell me is worry. They start worrying. And, one thing I observed in my wonderful, fabulous mother, she was a worrywart. That was what I called it. I don't know why you get the wart, but I called her a worrywart. And I just thought, that was really the basis of my encephalitis, insomnia, worrying.
Oh,
worrying.
interesting.
And of course, when you do obstetrics, I used to think about the physical exam and where the head was, and where the cervical exam and how low, and her blood pressure and how's her urine, patient
Right.
after patient who was due. I mean, instead of counting sheep, I was reciting like my obstetrical practice. Well, I can tell you that doesn't help you go to sleep at night.
Yes,
So
right.
again, I can laugh at myself because I survived, but it was a nearly lethal practice.
It was, yes.
So,
Yes.
to do this in a way where we love ourselves in that playful way, like, okay, we're all just kids. If I were really great at life, I didn't need to be born, right? That's what my mom used to say. Honey, if you were perfect, you didn't need to be born. You just stay an angel helping from the other side. So don't be so hard on yourself. That's a pretty nice mom.
Tell me about it. Wow.
So, yeah,
I think
sleep is huge. And anthroposophical consultations you can get by going online. It actually lists anthroposophical practitioners by area. We're very fortunate to have several in the Bay Area. And these are, I will say this, in general, they're people who march to a different drummer. Like I am not an anthroposophical doctor. I've read many of the texts. I do a pretty good job being, quote, holistic, but I've never prescribed eurythmy, which is the particular movement practice of anthroposophy. Well, I know a lot about eurythmy because my daughter went to a Waldorf school, which is a Steiner school of North America. So I know about the kinds of materials they use in art. Everything's natural. They are not exposed to anything polyester. It's silk or wool or cotton or linen. It's natural fibers. The toys are wood, etc. So, but that's the tactile realm. But I went to eurythmy performances since I was very young because my parents would take us.
Yes.
We didn't have Waldorf schools when I was a child, but I knew about the musical instruments. My mom had all these beautiful instruments from Germany. She was a musician and a teacher, and she used them with children especially, and especially disturbed children. And, so like if you're home on Saturday morning, which most of us are as kids, you hear her with her little music class with little kids. Yeah. And it's pretty enchanting. And I can't give you the long-term follow-up of these children because, they would be in their 60s now.
Right.
But I can say that there was a lot of joy that just bubbled out of her studio.
Yes.
And she did the same with adults using music as a therapy. So now we have actual music therapy, but we also have like Vox Mundi with Sylvia Nhat. I don't know if you've heard of her, but her whole thing is really about chanting and music. And she has many traditions that she's a very competent musician and singer. So it's really a joy. But Vox Mundi's online and just see what feels kind of cool to you. Some things feel weird and you're not going to do that. And maybe the eurythmy practice just looks too weird, but you'll see it online, by the way.
Yes.
So that's my whole thing is I think to be curious about things about which you hadn't heard and see if there's a wisdom in that realm that helps you address some of your quiet corners of discontent. Like, I'd like to be better at this, like going to sleep naturally. And I do think just simply the image of putting yourself to bed as you would put a little child to bed with kindness.
I love that. That is,
hum yourself a little tune.
Yes.
And of course, a lot of people put on Devi Premal or other wonderful, tranquil musicians. And we have, again, with your little smartphone, you can listen to beautiful, timeless music from all over the world. Mostly, you're going to be received whatever organ system you're dealing with. Those of us who are attracted, for example, let's say the GI surgeon who goes into colorectal cancer care. Okay, you can say, whoa, why would anybody do that? What a bummer. On the other hand, it's an opportunity to save lives and put people back together so they're, quote, whole again. So even though the surgeon herself or himself may not embody all the things that we would ideally like in, one fantastic provider, but they provide a place to get the right operation, the right follow-up, and then it's your journey as you travel through this to choose the allied healthcare practitioners. For example, if your colon has been rearranged, maybe your bowels are sort of weird. A lot of people after that are prone to diarrhea. Okay, well, are you going to live a lifetime of avoiding social situations because you get this urgency and you just don't want to be with others? No, you find, again, maybe energy medicine, maybe an acupuncturist will help literally slow those peristaltic waves. So we can look at it in a Western medicine view and say, oh, just take paregoric, take Lomotil, take these drugs. But let's complement that and see, they may teach you mudras, little hand pressure, interesting hand positions. This is from the Ayurvedic tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So to honor the complexity of your being, like your physical being, because you're in a body right now, but you're also many enchanting, amazing other elements. And, mostly we've run right past ourselves. I wish I could remember which of the Christian mystics said, man, of course, again, antiquated language, but humans, stop and marvel at the grandness of a vista overlooking the mountains and the forests. And yet we run right past ourselves without so much as even a single thought. Wow. I think it was Sir Thomas Aquinas, but that has been a guiding thought for me. Wow, that is so true.
Yes.
I am not a mechanism on two legs with arms to get the work done,
Right.
And to honor yourself, body, mind, spirit, and to think about that. We don't have an answer. I don't have an answer in this lifetime yet, but I dwell in those fascinating realms. And I do think it gives you a healing energy. Literally, kind of with the breath, it opens you up. As opposed to defending and cringing, more pain, more agony. No, this is a healing community. We can pretty much wiggle our way out of a lot of body misery with time and help. And you deserve to give yourself the attention that helps you achieve that balance.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. CancerTalks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. If you'd like to be in community with other cancer thrivers seeking personal transformation, join us on Zoom every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific. Visit cancertalks.com/Zoom to register. If you're moved to donate, please visit patreon.com/cancertalks.